For so many product based entrepreneurs, getting into retail feels like the dream. You imagine seeing your product on the shelf at Target or Walmart or Shoppers Drug Mart. You imagine scale, visibility, validation. You imagine customers discovering your brand in the wild and your business suddenly growing to a whole new level. And listen, retail can absolutely be transformative. But what I've learned, both through building Mabel's Labels and through years of coaching entrepreneurs, is that retail is not only a growth opportunity, it's a completely different business model. And if you go in too early or without fully understanding what you're signing up for, it can create enormous pressure on your margins, your inventory, your cash flow, and your team. That's why I wanted to create this series. Because I think there's a conversation missing in entrepreneurship right now in the product space. We hear a lot about landing the retailer, getting the meeting, getting on the shelf. But we don't talk enough about what happens after that. What retailers actually expect from you, how much working capital it takes, what happens when your product doesn't turn fast enough, or how easy it is to believe that more distribution automatically means more profit when the opposite can be true. Today's guest brings such a fascinating perspective to this conversation because she has lived both sides of it. Kathy Vurinaris is the founder of Sleaks. Sleaks is a product created to support women dealing with bladder leakage and incontinence, particularly during menopause and aging. Before becoming an entrepreneur, though, Kathy spent years inside the retail and product development world, working with major retailers and brands, including in drugstore, beauty, and consumer packaged goods categories. So I think what makes this conversation really interesting is that Kathy understands retail not just as a founder chasing shelf space, but as someone who has actually sat on the other side of the table. And one of the things I appreciate most about this conversation with Kathy is not rushing into retail, although she absolutely could. Instead, she's asking herself deeper questions. Is the brand established enough yet? Is there enough traction? Will the product actually turn fast enough to survive on shelf? Can the margins support the hidden costs that come with big retail? All of these are incredibly smart questions because one of the biggest myths in entrepreneurship is that scale fixes everything. Scale only works when the fundamentals underneath the business are strong. And sometimes the most strategic decision you can make is to wait, to build your direct-to-consumer business first, to strengthen your messaging, to understand your customer more deeply, to create more demand before you create distribution. In this episode, Kathy and I are talking about the realities of retail readiness, what founders need to understand before pursuing retail partnerships, the financial and operational risks that often get overlooked, and why having a great product is only one small part of succeeding in retail. So if you've ever dreamed about seeing your product on shelves, or if you're actively pursuing retail right now, this conversation is going to help. It's going to give you a grounded, strategic lens on what that path really looks like. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to this new series about bringing your product-based business to big retail. Today, I am speaking with Kathy Vurinaris, who is the founder of Sleaks, and we're going to get to talking about her product-based business and why she founded Sleaks and what it's for. But Kathy's also, in her pre-entrepreneur days, she is a seasoned retail product development person. And so I think it's interesting because, as she says in her own bio, Sleeks is the culmination of her professional journey. She made products for others. And now she's brought that into her own entrepreneurial venture, thinking about branding and product development and how the strategy of how you sell converges. And so I'm really excited to have her on board with me for this series, where we're going to talk about her business and also your business and about whether going into retail is the right thing for you. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Julie. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about Sleeks.
So Sleek started, it's interesting. It started my 88-year-old mother is my muse. And I was in between jobs and looking for an opportunity. And I I moved my mom into a home 2 years ago, and she moved from her home, which had a bathroom really close by, but in the home she was moving into, it wasn't close. So she said, "Take me to Shoppers Drug Mart and help me find a solution because I'm not going to make it to the bathroom in the middle of it." So, standing in front of the incontinence aisle, she said to me, "I am not wearing disposable diapers. You need to design something for me." So, I thought, yeah, this is a great opportunity for me. This is a space I know. I came from drug. I had launched, a 13 categories in Shoppers Drug Mart under the brand of Fresh. And so, yeah, this was a space I knew really well. And
Yeah.
also what I realized, there was a huge gap in the market.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, I think the best businesses get started is the like noticing in that moment where we decide, nobody's doing this. And I think the world needs it.
Yeah.
My mother needs it. So that means it's even more.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And,
Good.
I
And
think,
so you've been now through a whole product development cycle and you've
yeah,
actually launched your product and it is for sale on your
yeah,
website.
it really is. Yeah. So, and the other thing that we're doing is we're actually affiliating with medical clinics because it is a
Yes.
medical product and particularly focused on the menopause space. Because what I've realized is the customer is younger than I thought they
Oh.
were. Yeah,
Interesting. Isn't
yeah,
it interesting how you start with a hypothesis, really? And as you gather more data points, things do shift and change, don't they?
yeah. They really
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
your customer tells you, right? Like
Yeah.
you go into a business, you start a business with a lot of assumptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then you launch, and then you really learn who your customer is, who
Yeah.
the product is resonating with. And that's one of the things that I would say that's one of the biggest learnings as an entrepreneur, as a startup, is learning to pivot. Like
Yeah.
really, really watching and pivoting fast. And as a lot of people would say, failing fast, because realizing,
Yeah.
like that's the wrong thing and I need to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious about, as somebody who is building a brand now and who has brought lots of things to the retail market, how do you know what's your cue to understand when a brand could be ready to go to retail?
I come from a corporate background, so for me,
Hmm.
I'm very due diligence and all of that is kind of ingrained in how I think. So I think I really did it I built a really strong foundation before I went to market. And
Yeah.
I think that there's a few fundamental things that as a founder, you need to look at, like gross margin, net profit,
Yes.
market opportunity, things that a lot of people don't look at
Yeah.
until it's too late.
Right. Well, and I mean, just from my own experience, I think that, even when I thought I was ready to go to
Yeah.
retail, and I mean, the first retailer that we sold to, Mabel's Labels, was Walmart in Canada.
Mm,
And we
big
went
one.
into all like 400 stores across the country. And even though I thought we were ready, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they have really high demands, right? And
Yes.
the other thing too is they have processes and built-in costs that a lot of
Yeah.
people don't factor in. And
Yes.
because I come from that kind of business, like I know that. So I've gone in, like I believe that we always said it when I was at Loblaws that 8 times cost was really where we needed to be.
Yeah.
And I went in 10 times cost
Right.
just because the market's shifting, foreign exchange is shifting. I really wanted to pad for a lot of those things that were unknown.
Yeah. Yes, because it's one of those things, the old adage, right? It's easy to get easier, but it's hard to get harder. And that definitely I think applies because once you're in and you have a deal signed, renegotiating that if you're not making money, you're not going to do it.
No.
No.
No, for sure.
So what would you say, like the things that need to be working in your business before you even think about going to retail? Margins.
Well,
We talked about a
margins.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also think that for me, I think that, you need to know what the expectations and the KPIs are for them.
Hmm.
And you need to know whether or not your product can actually meet their KPIs because that's all they really care
Hmm.
about, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
what are their KPIs? Turnover is a huge one. So one of the reasons why I've actually decided to pull back and not go into retail
Hmm.
is because I don't feel like my brand is well established enough for
Right.
me to actually get the turnover that's required for them,
Hmm.
the last thing I want to go to do is go into somebody like a Shoppers and
Yeah.
sit on the shelf. Like
Right.
there'd be nothing worse
No.
than that.
No.
Their expectation, I know because I was there, I sat on
Hmm.
the other side of the table. The expectation is
Hmm.
60% turnover in
Yeah.
90 days.
Right. So that
That's
means that, so just to be clear on what that means for every 10 items that go on the shelf, they want six of them to sell within 90
so
days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a really, even for an
That's a
established
big
brand, that's hard.
expectation.
That's a
Yeah.
huge expectation.
Yeah.
And and their terms their terms can be really punitive if you do not meet those KPIs.
Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah. And as a small brand, like they're not going to negotiate their 80-page contract with you.
no,
And I do
pretty
remember
set
that.
in
I
stone.
remember having the contract, some of the first contracts we signed for big retail, reviewed by a lawyer and basically saying, they're not going to change anything for me. I know this. So the lens I want you to put on your review is, what are the pitfalls for me? What do I need to
Right.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why for me, it's like understanding what their expectations are and
Yeah.
working backwards to that. Can you
Right.
achieve those expectations?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say, your brand doesn't have enough traction, how much traction is enough? What should people be thinking about when they try to evaluate that?
Going into a big retailer, I think that either there's nothing compared to that. And I also think that you have to have their support. You need to have their commitment that they're going to promote your brand and promote your product. Because without that as well, so you have to have traction, but you also
Hmm.
have to have their support as
Hmm.
a big retailer. Um, so yeah, for me, I don't know. I would say that you need to people need to know who your brand is and what your product is just by saying the name, by
Yeah.
going into one of those big national retailers.
Yeah. Yes. And I would say in Canada, when we went to Walmart and appeared on the shelf, we had the following built in our direct to consumer online business that we could
Right.
push people into the stores. Um, but the places, we didn't have the support we needed were in, was the product actually on shelf in the store that person was going to go into? Had it made it out of the
Right.
back room? Like, I think there's a lot of things that we can dive into as we get a little farther
Yeah.
into this conversation
Right.
about what it's like when you actually get there.
Yes.
But in terms of readiness, I think we had the traction, and the ability to withstand the really long payment cycles. You're paying for
Yes,
something,
that's
getting it
true.
made
Yes.
overseas, bringing it in, and waiting all that time to get paid. So,
Right. And
yeah,
the other thing too is if you're not an established brand, and this we can get into this in more detail, you're not going to be a priority to be paid either. So
yeah,
if your terms are 90 days, the likelihood is you're going to get paid in 120,
yeah,
even though the terms say 90, right? So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And it just, yeah, depends who you're working with.
correct. Yeah.
Who do you think? I mean, you talked about why you're not going to pursue retail. What are some other
Yeah.
reasons not to pursue retail, or who shouldn't be pursuing retail?
Wow. Well, I think that anybody who, if you have a product that your category is crowded,
Yeah,
that's somebody who's also like, so I also come from a cosmetic background. I was at Sephora, and I think that just as an example, skincare is a really crowded space, right?
mm-hmm.
if you think that you're going, and so a lot of brands of skincare, their goal is to be in Sephora.
Mm,
But if you don't have a really distinct point of differentiation within that category, retail is going to be a really big struggle for you. And,
mm-hmm,
their terms are also very similar to, they're a
mm-hmm.
big retailer, global retailer as
Yeah,
well. So, I think know your competition, I think is a
yeah.
really, really, really important one. Um, so yeah, I speak to, I'm in a lot of groups with a lot of other startups, and a lot of them are product-based companies.
Mm-hmm,
And if you ask them what their point of differentiation is, they look at you like a deer in the headlights, and they don't they
mm-hmm.
they don't even know because they've never even thought about it.
Right. Yes. Because they're down the rabbit hole. They believe so strongly in what they're doing, right? But yes, you've got to, on a retail shelf in a lineup of 8 or 10 or 12 products, you've got to be able to, for people to understand what it is you do and why.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where branding is important,
Yeah.
packaging, all of those things.
Yeah.
It's, I think those are really important. You think about the Mabel's labels as an example,
Yeah.
the name is catchy, right?
Yes.
It, that's really important.
Yeah. Yes, it's super important. And, we had already, 8 or 9 years of brand recognition
Yeah.
in a direct to consumer environment before we did go into retail. But that is one thing I think of. I think that it seems like it will be scale, right? To go to
Hmm.
retail. It feels
Yeah.
like, well, if I get into, 2,000 Target stores or 2,200, I think they might have now,
Yeah.
it's going to be scale. I'm automatically going to, and it isn't necessarily true. The second part I find about it is that it's a whole different business with a completely different kind of P&L than a direct to consumer e-commerce business.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, direct to consumer is high margin, right?
Yeah,
Because there's the overhead. You control all of the overhead, right?
yeah,
And so it's very, very different. Whereas,
yes,
there's a lot of costs that goes into that you're paying for the retailer that's selling it.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's true. And there's always seemingly more costs they want you to take on for them. So that part never
Absolutely.
ends. The
It
negotiating is
doesn't.
never done, right?
No,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You got to pay for
yeah,
your own discounts. You've got to, it's like, and
yeah,
you don't know when that's going to happen.
yeah,
So you have to go in knowing,
yeah,
understanding
yeah,
the depth of that contract.
yeah. So going back a little bit now to your 8 to 10 times cost
Yeah,
for retail price or for
yeah,
sell-in,
yeah,
right? Which
yeah.
means it's actually like 16 to 20 for MSRP, manufacturer's suggested
No,
retail
no,
price. No, 8 to 10 from your
eight to
cost.
10 from cost for your
Yeah.
retail. Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
so, I think direct to consumer, you're seeing people more between 25 and 50%, right? As opposed to that like 10 to 12.5%. If we go back, if I think about it as percentages, right? Because if you're at 10% cost means you have a 90% gross margin. And I think direct to
correct.
consumer is more like 25% cost, 75 to 40 or 50
Yeah,
cost to gross margin of 50 or 60.
yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
you can run a profitable business on that.
Direct to consumer.
Yes.
But if you think you can go retail, you're never going to make money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you do your own vertical retail. But that's a whole different conversation,
Right.
right?
Right. And you're
So,
talking like Joe Fresh open their own stores, right?
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other examples. Well, I think Nick's is probably another
Yeah.
example where they open their
It's a
own
good example.
stores because
Correct.
although they're very big now, they are entrepreneur company, right? Founded.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so that's the interesting piece as well, I think, in terms of, when you're small and you have choices all the time with limited resources, building both sides of the business, the direct to consumer and the retail side, I think is incredibly difficult.
Very, very, and very different. You really do have to wear completely different hats because
Hmm.
they're very different verticals.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you see, like, as somebody who's in the market now and obviously talking to lots of other entrepreneurs who want to go into retail and who are
Yeah.
chasing that at the moment, what do you see in terms of like how are they doing it? Because in my experience, which is a little bit longer ago,
Yeah.
finding the right people to hire on my internal team to manage the retail business was very, very difficult.
Yeah. Well, what I started to do is I hired a salesperson whose background is selling into drug.
Okay.
And so I had
Yeah.
built that cost. So, I know kind of what they expect to be paid and, what kind of commission they expect and all of those things. So I'd worked on a straight commission kind of basis.
Yeah.
Um, and but the reality is that to go into the kind of retailers that are appropriate for it, you also have to think about the kind of retailers that are appropriate for your business, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so for
Yep.
me, it's drug. What I
For sure it
realized,
is, right?
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know, 73% of all incontinence products are sold at drugstores.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it
Not
makes no
surprising to
sense
me,
for me.
right?
Yeah, and it makes
No, and then
it,
the second category would be stores like Walmart, like those superstore
yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
formats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And drug grocery is actually one category.
it is.
That's how it's looked at in the industry in sort of retail.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the other category would be specialty on lingerie. So,
Oh, yeah,
like the
okay.
underwear department of,
Interesting.
yeah, the underwear department at Simon's, as an example, would
Yeah,
be a target, right?
yeah,
Um, so, uh, so because that's more destination,
yeah,
right? For that kind of
yes.
specialty product.
And like going all the way back to what you said about your mom at the very beginning, that your mother said, I'm not wearing those. I think that a lot of women feel that way, right? And so they're
Yeah,
surviving on less than ideal
solutions.
solutions, wearing,
Yep.
pads and those kinds of things, right? So
Yeah.
to have you be able to buy a beautiful looking product in a not incontinence aisle of the drugstore is likely appealing to people.
Right.
Hmm.
Exactly. But what I realized is that to go into the drug grocery, I needed to have a distributor,
Yes.
right? And I'm not prepared. I just don't think I'm ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because their goal is to sell, their
Yeah.
goal is to put you on shelf. But if
Yeah.
my brand isn't well recognized enough,
Yes.
that's that's a recipe for failure
Right.
in my mind,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because, like I said previously, there's nothing worse than having your product out there but just sitting.
Yes.
It's
Well, also
that
because, although you're going to get paid for it eventually,
not
um,
necessarily, because if you don't
you get
meet the
into
KPIs,
returns and you get into like all your money is tied up in that inventory that's sitting on shelves, and you
yeah,
really unlocking that money depends on the item starting to get
yes,
some velocity and turn off the
correct,
shelf, right?
correct, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
yeah, so I've completely made a pivot. I'm
Yeah.
actually right now doing a course on Shopify optimization.
Great. So
Um,
important, right?
by Shopify.
Yeah.
And it's about messaging. It's about conversion. Like it's
Yeah.
about all of those KPIs
Yeah.
and they have the data, right? They know what works and what doesn't. So
Yes.
I've decided to lean into that instead.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that, you can keep yourself in a smaller, like one team kind of format, right?
Yeah,
When you're tackling one revenue stream and you
yeah,
can build the brand, you can do all the things that might be able to build the bridge over to going into retail down the road.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I don't go into retail for 2 years, I'm good with that.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And
And
that is sort of comes to that, like, what are the things people need to get right before they go to retailers? It's to really get good at selling what you have, knowing that your product market fit is there,
correct.
um, and, really digging in and learning the technicalities in
Yeah,
today's world of running a direct to consumer e-commerce firm.
right.
Yeah.
And so many people, regardless of age now, are buying online.
Yes.
They're like they just are.
Yeah.
Um, like I have I'm not going to name the brand, but I know somebody who has an underwear brand who has six styles and does $42 million a year direct to consumer with a team
Yep.
of six.
I know.
Right?
That sounds like a business I would love to own.
Me too. Right? So that's
Yeah.
the goal, right? So if I achieve something like that, I don't need to be in retail.
Yeah. No,
And at that
exactly.
point, hopefully,
Yeah.
based on my contacts and the people that I know, retailers will be wanting me. Those big retailers like the Shoppers and the
Yeah.
Walmarts, they'll be knocking on my door,
Yes. Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
I have greater negotiating power then.
Yes. Also true because you get into like the financial costs of inventory and inventory management, but also listing fees,
Yep.
kitting, shipping, delivery, like all those different
All
components
those
that come
things.
into play.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, I've already built in the cost of PDQs and floor stands and all
Yes.
of those things just because I know how much they cost. And I know that that's the expectation of a lot of retailers, but a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know that. So,
Yeah.
like, I know how to build a profitable planogram,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because that's what I had to do.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know how to do that. So, how to
Hmm.
make a small amount of product look like it's a lot, but that
Yes.
will turn quickly,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yep.
those are the kinds of tricks that I would say are to my advantage that a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs and startups with product based businesses don't know
Yeah.
because they when you're really passionate about your product, you don't think that way, right?
No.
Right? You just
No.
want
And
to
it's
get it out there.
Yeah, and I think we don't realize how technical it actually is.
Uh-huh.
It has its own, I mean, you just threw out a whole bunch of terms there, right? But
Sorry.
no, but like a PDQ is a box that you can rip open and it's shelf ready and you put it on and your product is there. You see them
Yeah.
at Walmart or other,
All
now I see
Shoppers
them
has them.
everywhere,
End
everywhere.
caps, like
Yeah,
yeah.
end caps at
Yeah,
the end of an aisle, the display that goes
correct.
there, like
Yes.
all of those things, like you're learning this whole new language and this whole, and so we'll put a glossary of terms to go with this episode, just because of how specific the language is that goes with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So I want to kind of close off here by saying, so the readiness and the reality are the first step of deciding whether you're going to pursue retail.
Right.
Um, and I think that it is that, like, you need more money than you think. You've got to find the right experts to help you.
Yeah.
You've got to decide if you've got the margins for it.
Hmm.
And if you don't, it brings with it a lot of risk that we'll talk about in the next
Yeah.
episode. And then, you've got to really, really keep it tight.
Yeah.
One thing I learned with a big US
Assortment.
retailer, assortment,
It needs to be
they,
tight.
and yeah, and we had a big US retailer where they took us and then the buyer changed and the new buyer wasn't the
Oh,
same champion. And so they slimmed the assortment down to two SKUs on one peg and it didn't sell. And we got
yeah.
delisted a year later because it didn't
Right.
sell.
Right.
And we knew
Because
it
you
wasn't
also
going to
need a
sell,
minimum
but we
presence.
didn't want to
Oh,
walk away. And it's the biggest lesson, we should have walked away.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Because you need a
yes.
minimum presence as well, right? As much as you need to have an edited assortment
Yeah.
that's is going to turnover of your best products, you
Yes.
also have to have enough of a presence to
Yes.
attract customers,
Yeah. So
for
people
people to
can find
find
you.
you. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, we're going to go on to execution, and I can't wait to dive into this more.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks so much for joining me in this special series on retail strategy for product-based businesses. I hope these conversations gave you a more honest, practical, and strategic look at what it really takes to grow through retail. And perhaps even more importantly, how to decide whether retail is the next right step for your business at all. One of the things I've learned through entrepreneurship is that there is no single path to building a successful company. Some brands thrive in retail. Some thrive direct to consumer. Some build hybrid models. And some discover that scaling sustainably means saying, not yet, or even not for us. All of those decisions can be smart ones. The key is understanding the realities behind the opportunity so you can build intentionally instead of reactively. If this series sparked questions for you about growth, leadership, scaling, retail strategy, or the operational side of building a product-based business, I'd love to support you further. You can learn more about my work, coaching, speaking, and the Big Gorgeous Goals framework at www.julieellis.ca. And if you're a founder navigating growth decisions in real time, you can also learn more about my Pocket Coaching program. It's a voice note-based coaching designed to give entrepreneurs strategic support, perspective, and decision-making guidance exactly as you need them. Because sometimes the most valuable thing in business, it's not another course or another framework. It's about being able to have the right conversation at the right moment. If you enjoyed this series, I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or share it with another entrepreneur who's trying to decide what growth should look like for them. Thanks again for being here. And until next time, keep chasing your big, gorgeous goals.